Okay. Glad y'all made it in the morning. Within the next hour, we're going to create a really cool app together for DNN. And it's going to have a few things which are not usual in DNN. For example, that I can install it multiple times so that each portal could have a different edition, which doesn't work with DNN. It's going to be very simple, and we're going to leverage open source work other people have done, and therefore optimize our time. So we're going to get started here. So that's the mission, an amazing app in less than 1 hour. And yeah, low-hanging fruits. I mean, we can always reinvent the wheel. We can always find another better way to do some CRM or whatever. But we can always just look if there's anything out there which would already do a lot of this and see if we can integrate it in a reasonable way. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at timeline.js. It's a really cool JavaScript which just produces this interactive timeline, and it'll do a lot of things automatically, like integrate Google Maps. It'll pick pictures up from Flickr. You can link to Wikipedia, and it'll automatically just assemble like a summary of it if you think that data is important. So it's a very, very neat timeline tool. Maybe you can quickly demonstrate it, Raphael.
Yes. Where? No. Yes, so this is the tool. Basically you have the history here, for example, of a company or something else. You can click on the elements in the timeline here. It's also responsive, so it fills the screen. And you can input many things like Wikipedia articles, or blog quotes, websites, Google Map. Yes.
So now this tool, of course, needs the data as JavaScript. Now if I would go to my customer and say, okay, no problem, you have this WYSIWYG editor, and in there's this really funny thing with curly braces, and then you can just write in the values there and just copy that line and edit the values. It's no problem, I'm sure you can do it, and if it doesn't work, just roll back the previous version and try it all over. Then this may work for a programmer, but not for a normal person. So what we're going to do is we're going to integrate this and make it even better. So we have the free script. We're going to use all the data handling functionality of TooSexy Content. So that means we automatically have a multilingual system in this hour. The data's version. The customer, if he fucks up, he can just easily do a rollback. And for example, things like creating a JSON is already given. It's just a little checkbox somewhere. It's all automated. And DNN search integration works as well. Not so trivial. And all we have to do is kind of like combine these two free tools. So let's look. Yeah, and this is us. So let's get to work. At first, we're just going to quickly show you what an app is, the way we understand it. And for that, Raphael has an empty DNN installation running. And we're now going to add an app, an existing one, from the app catalog. What we have here, by the way, is a DNN 7.2 and TooSexy Content 6.06, I believe. And
now let's start the nuke. Okay. Ah,
Okay.
here you are.
So while he's doing this, I'm just going to tell you a few things about it. And basically, an app is a set of some C# files, basically Razor files, templates, how to present this thing in different ways. And it's all packaged in a zip. You can auto-create an app once you've developed something. And the idea is really that we can distribute these things, somebody can install it, and since it's just Razor, it's very easy to change. So for example, when we're done this hour, you will be able to install this app on your DNN, and you'll be able to make some changes. Maybe you'd like a different color or whatever. It's all just going to be there. And since it's all, the source is there, you're not getting a DLL. It's also more open source than a DLL because you can actually do something with it. So we're going to import an app, and there's a link there to find more apps, but we just downloaded some just to be on the safe side with the internet connection here. And when you upload it, it looks what kind of data types do you have, the content types, what configurations you have. It prepares all the view management and stuff. Yeah, just keep going. I'll just talk. So this is a very trivial demo app to explain how to use Razor. We've discovered that very often if you post a code snippet somewhere, it's possible somebody won't be able to use it because some little detail is just not going to be right. So we would rather just show a little example, like here's an example with a simple loop, and if you look at the source code, which you can in here, this would show the user how to write the code for this. So it's a very trivial example, but it just makes it much more discoverable. You can also change something here and just see what happens. Okay. We maybe even have a more complex app to install, just as a second example. Last week I wrote a blog about different ways to access SQL data from Razor with data readers, data tables, PWPoco, things like that. And again, if I would post this code somewhere, people maybe can copy paste it, maybe something goes wrong, maybe the color enhancer thing on the browser may make it hard to copy. So I just made a needs a newer version. Yep. So we have 606 here, so I can't install this. So you see it also checks what target version you're already using and tells you that. Okay, so let's create our own. Let's just kill this, or can you switch just back to the slides? Yeah. So this is what we need. The timeline.js script, 3.2. The current DNN, current to sexy content. So all easy, download, install, and free. We're going to need a little bit of HTML, but barely any, just to make sure that this timeline is shown at the right spot. A tiny bit of Razor will show you. It's not necessary, but it makes life a bit easier. We need the JSON, which is a given. And then we need a few lines of JavaScript just to convert our JSON format into the format the timeline is expecting. So what are we going to do? We're going to create the app. We're going to configure the content types. And we're going to enable JSON. And so that's more or less everything we do in DNN. And the entire rest is done in HTML JavaScript. And here again, we really believe in these JavaScript applications. There's so many benefits of it, that it's sexy, of course, but also that you can find a PHP web designer who can do this for you. And this just may make the job market a little bit easier for us. So we looked at the timeline.js, and of course there's a few fields it needs. For example, the media thing is just one line of whatever. It can be a Google Maps URL, it can be text or something, it can be a picture, and the rest it'll just take care of. Okay, so let's get going. I'll just tell you a little bit what Raphael's doing, but he's just going to work now. So the first step is, of course, to create the app. This will also generate a global ID in the background for this app. This is just so in the future when it's like on the app catalog and your system has this app, it can tell you that there's an update for it. Okay, so that's just creating it. You can now choose it in this drop-down, but it won't be very exciting because it doesn't do anything yet. Okay, and there's also no view or anything configured. So Raphael's going to go ahead and now create the content types for this.
I think it's the internet connection because of this.
Yep.
I'll start with the field headline, and this will be a string. So I have my first content type, my first field in the content type for a timeline entry. And I just want to show you how I can create a simple template with a content type that has just one field. Let's create a template for this content type. I think I have to disable the internet. Where is it? So I'll create a template, call it timeline. It will be a razor template. And here I can choose the content type for this template. I'll take this timeline entry, the one I created before, and I'll enable the list for this template. Now if I go back here, I can see it says no demo item exists for the selected template, so I'll go here and write something. So now I have a file in DNN in the portals folder. I can show you where it is. So here I have a folder timeline JS and my razor template in here. Now if I change this template, I'll just do a test. We can see that this is my template. I could also edit it here, like you saw before. So now I'll just create a simple example on how to display all entries in this list in the template. As you can see, I want to display the headline in a h1 tag. So let's try if this works. Here it is. Let's add another item. So this is a basic Razor template that loops all information in the list.
Could you just add a toolbar?
Toolbar, yes. As you can see, there is a Razor token that I can use to create a toolbar. For a positioning in the DOM, I need to have a class here. Sorry. And now I have an inline toolbar to edit and add items.
So this, maybe there was also the question yesterday. We really believe in front-end editing because we just think this is the way people can understand what's going on. We really don't believe in back ends where people need a second interface to just find out where things are to update them. Okay, so this was just a very quick and simple thing just to get started. So we're going to now extend the content type with all the other fields that it needs.
So we'll have a start date, which will be date time. We want to have end date, date time. We want to have a body field that contains the text for this item, which is a string field, and we want to have a media field, which will be a hyperlink field. So, something else, Daniel? Okay, credit and captions. I found
Credit and caption, yeah.
Also string. So now we have our content type ready. What I'm going to do is to define headline as a required field, because that's the information every entry in our timeline should have. Then I'll go to the, I'll define body to be a WYSIWYG editor, just to make sure the user can enter some formatted text. Then I configure the hyperlink field to display an image manager. I think that's it. So now let's try our new content type. So as you can see, I configured the content type fields, I added fields, and now I can edit all these fields I added here in this edit mask. Let's change a few things.
And Raphael, when you're done typing, maybe we can show them the multilingual feature.
Let's upload some Windows default images. Oh, they're not here. Okay, I have no images. Let's skip this for now.
Now, what you'll see in the multi-language implementation is we believe that when you do something multilingually, you very often don't want to translate all the fields. Not now and not in the future. So creating a copy of this record would be a stupid thing to do because, for example, the date, even if I describe this in French or German, is probably going to stay the same. So we're just going to like double click on the lock to open the first one. We could also run it through Google Translate in that little menu there, but we're offline for right now. So we'd like manually translate the headline, we'd manually translate the description, but the picture would stay the same, the credit who made this would stay the same, and some pieces would stay the same. But the content editor can decide himself which pieces stay the same. So a lot of solutions will just say, okay, I'm going to create my content type and I'm going to disable translation on some fields. But that doesn't work either. Because think about it, like the picture is usually not translated, but there are exceptions. Like sometimes there's a caption in the picture or something. And this way, the editor can very easily choose themselves what they're going to write in. So maybe you can write something German in that for a second, just so we have that. Yep. Okay, so now if you'd switch languages, then you'll see the first one was took the German version. The other ones are not translated, so there's an automatic fallback to the previously main language. So that's all very, very simple. It's seamless and it just works. And we've just discovered it's very easy to train people to use this. So it's like very low entry. Okay, so that's the basics. Let's start timelining this.
Yep.
For the timeline, you can just start working. I'll just say a few things. We need to include some JavaScript, some CSS, and of course, we've prepared this a little bit just because otherwise it would take a bit too long to type and until we figured out all our typos. But it's not a big deal.
Okay, so the first thing we want to make sure is that we can get the data in JavaScript. So this is a setting that is here in module settings. I can say I want to publish the data, and this is something you have to explain.
In very short, we can have a lot of streams of different data coming through. This is a very simple example, so we just have one stream with the list. But for example, we could also say there's some settings, maybe to change the color or something, and you'd also need that in JSON, so that's a separate stream. And this is just security precautions, because if every piece of data were automatically available as JSON, well, you'd probably run into some problems sooner or later. So that link down there will deliver the data, but only, yeah, there we go, but only if it's enabled. So here's the JSON with all the data. By the way, there's some additional stuff in there. You can also apply attribute stripping, so it doesn't deliver every full entity, just parts of it. Again, for security precautions. But right now, we just want everything.
Okay. Now, the first thing we want to have is we want to include some JavaScript in here. The first one is one of toSexy content that will help us to get the data without writing our own code. The second one is the timeline script we want to include. The third one is our own script for this app, and this is a CSS file that contains some style information for our app.
Yep. And notice the app path there in all the things. So there's just all these very simple Razor helpers in the background which provide you with all this information that you need. Because of course, if we would install the same app multiple times in one portal, and there's real scenarios why you'd want to do this, then each one has a different path. So that just helps you with it.
So this is the folder of timeline.js you can download on GitHub. Yes, it's free. So I'll just copy these folders I need to our app. Okay. So Just make sure the paths are correct. Okay.
So we're just creating a blank JavaScript and a blank style sheet file right now. And he's just creating them right now because we're already referring to them from the HTML. In this demo, we're not going to use the bundling of JavaScript and CSS. But it's very easy. All you have to do is add an attribute, and toSexyContent will automatically add it to the bundling list. So that's simple as well.
Yes, it's actually here. This will tell toSexyContent to pick the script up and include it with client dependency so that it's all bundled in one file. So that's the JavaScript we want to have. Some preparation. This is something toSexyContent provides. It's a function to load data from a module. And this is the timeline JS call that actually happens. Now, one thing we have to do is we have to transform the data because timeline JS wants to have the data in a particular format. So it's just some more JavaScript. Okay. So what's missing now is one line of CSS. And timeline.js needs a placeholder somewhere on the page, like a div or something. And I will create a div here. And one thing that I will do, I will add the module ID as an attribute here. So let's see what it does. Nothing. Okay. I think I'll have to debug this. I know what the problem is. In toSexyContent you can create a content type just for the whole list. And that's the thing we are missing here. So I'll create a new content type, timeline settings. And the things we want to have in the timeline settings, quickly check here. We need the headline, we need a text and a start date for the whole timeline. So not for a single entry, but for the whole timeline.
So you keep on working, I'll tell them quickly what it's about. Usually if you have a list, you're repeating a certain piece of information, like you're repeating, okay, this is Daniel and this is his picture and things like that. But the list may also have a special record, like a configuration, which says something like, this is the title of the list, and this is how many items I would like to see. So whenever we enable a template to have a list, we can also say, okay, this also has a list settings, which is one level above that. And so that's a thing that will not repeat. That's just one single record. And with the timeline, that's a good example because we have different events that should show on the timeline, but we may want to configure the color of the timeline, or what zoom level it's at when it loads initially, or which date it should begin with. So that's it.
So I added some fields. The last one is for specifying at which slide the timeline should start. And I'll quickly make sure. There's another one. The timeline allows you to zoom into the entries. So, oh, that was wrong. I need a number field. So I just created a new content type, and now I have to say in my template configuration that I want to have these timeline settings as type for my list content. And now I can choose edit list values here, and I can enter these information.
Of course, this would also be, normally if we do this for customers, this is just a button in the template, just like you saw before with inline editing. This is just a faster way to do it when you don't really want to create a UI for it.
So let's see. It says.
We have some entries that have no data behind them yet.
Yeah. So I'll just delete this. So here we are.
Okay, so this is the first functioning timeline. You see at first we have the title. It's starting on April here, and the first entry, that's the one you press when you press next. That is the one we just made.
Yes.
So let's continue and add a few interesting pieces of media, right?
Yes, that's right. One thing I want to show you is this here. Actually, you can add the buttons we had before in the here below in the Razor template. We had content toolbar. In JavaScript, you need a little bit more. You need to yeah, that's a bit complicated, but
yeah. But in summary, we can also add inline editing buttons to the JavaScript output. So if we now look at the template in here, you'll see that this is the first timeline entry, and it too has the little edit button already built in. And this is, again, we just think the user loves this kind of stuff. He just sees the timeline, he presses edit on the right date, so he doesn't need a second interface to find the record. He just sees it on the screen, he edits it. Yep. And so, since of course here he needs the editing button, he still also needs an add button somewhere, which is probably something you're going to add in a second.
yes. I'll add it on before the timeline embed. Basically, it's an unordered list that has a specific CSS class that will be picked up by toSexy content and a small configuration, which action we want to take. And let's see if this works. Here you are.
So he's now going to add a few different media types, a video, a wiki page or something, just to kind of get the feeling for what the output is. And everything we're doing here is just provided by this timeline script. So we're not really doing any of the nice stuff, we're actually just connecting it to DNN. I'd like to mention a few things while he's just doing the typing here. For example, one of the issues you may have is that you may have a lot of too sexy content modules on the same page, which is a likely scenario. And that is why whenever we tell something to load the data, it needs to know for which module. Because some modules may have JSON enabled, others not. And that's why if you look at the code later on, you'll notice that we're passing the module ID through the JavaScript a few times just to make sure we can keep the data separate. This also helps us that when the data has been loaded the first time and it's needed a second time, it's not going to retrieve it anymore. It's cached on the client side by that little JavaScript controller we made. Another thing to mention is we're just delivering JSON. We're not delivering JSON-P. We're doing this on purpose because we simply believe that JSON-P is necessary for cross-domain, and we just think that all the basic scenarios need the data on the same domain, and if you really need to use the data on a separate domain, you're just going to have to write your own JavaScript serializer for that. We just figured if we would enable JSON-P by default, most people would be too worried that other domains would start getting their data out of the module, and they wouldn't want that. Okay, are we offline?
I tried to get online, but it doesn't seem to work. Ah.
Yes, it does. With a delay, but yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a video. Timeline.js supports many different things as you saw before. So I'll quickly add a new one. For example, a Google Maps.
And in this case right now, for this demo, we're just integrating it the way Timeline.js does it. So of course, we're just adding this Google Map URL. If we would do this for our customers, we would actually add a few more fields where we typed in the address because that's easier for the customer. There's also a Google Map. There's a GPS field pickers where you can then on screen move around the pin and then it gives you the GPS coordinates. We're just not doing this right now because an hour is a little bit short time. Didn't find it yet?
Maybe the internet's connection, but... Okay, it may be the new Google Maps link.
Go ahead.
Google Map changed the link quickly. Let's see if this works. Okay.
So typically, if your customer is on your website but doesn't have an internet connection, then he will experience this as well.
Okay. So I'll quickly add another one. Let's quickly get some images from...
Okay, what we're going to do after this, as soon as he's done with the picture, is we're going to do the last few steps to package this and distribute it. Because by tomorrow we'll put this in our app catalog, and then you guys can download it, install it, and modify it. So I'll just let him do this. I'll just explain one more thing that we're doing. Right now, if we add the app, the user would still have to enable JSON every time. This makes sense for simple scenarios, but if the user would have to install this Timeline.js and he would then first have to find out that he has to enable the JSON checkmark, that's not going to work. Now, so here we think this is data that we can actually say it's okay to publish as JSON. So we're actually going to enforce the JSON publishing and the code behind, just so the user doesn't have to set it every time. And so for this, there's a few like default events which happen. Like there's like toSexyContent will get all the data through the pipeline, we'll do all the filtering and everything and give it to the module. But then there's an event that you can raise to just change whatever data you have. You could, like here, add some SQL data from a different source. It'll then be also streamlined into the JSON, or a bunch of other features. So there's just this event which then prepares the data. And in there, because we know it's raised before any JSON processing happens, we added 2 lines of code which just say, yes, always enable JSON publishing, and these are the streams that we're actually publishing. Okay, I think you just added the code, right? I wasn't looking. Good. So we have a functioning timeline JS. It works in DNN, so let's package it.
I'll go to Apps Management. Here we have our app, and I'll click Export, Export.
So that's it. So what does it do? It packages the Razor files. It packages the content definitions. It packages all the labels. So for example, if you had a field headline and you had already translated the term headline into German and English and French, all those translations are in there. If we had a link to a file in DNN, it would include that file. And when you installed on the target system, it would of course get a new file ID. It would remap that as well. So there's a lot of things that it just does automatically for you. And yeah, that's just the way we think it should be. There's a few more things. He's just going to continue to probably install it on a new system just so you see it. But for example, the app global ID is also included in there. And that allows us to create a getting started page in the app catalog, which is always displayed if somebody goes into the settings for this app. So in other words, we can then say, well, this app, wherever it's distributed, we can still modify the getting started page centrally. So if somebody like opens this app and tries to manage it a year in the future, and we would like to say, but goodness, there's a security problem, please be aware of this, or there's some really neat features, or simple instructions like install the app, add a little bit of data, and then you'll see what happens. We can keep this information central, even though the app has been distributed all over the world. So you probably just saw that the package was like 12 megabytes. It's probably because there was 1 or 2 big screenshots in there.
No, it was. This is the module. This is toSexyContent.
Okay,
I had a fresh installation of DNN, and so the first step is to install toSexyContent. And then inside toSexyContent we can install our app we just exported.
So, yep, we're just adding a blank app. There's no apps installed yet. You need to configure it first. This is an installation step for toSexyContent. So there's no app.
Here it is.
So a lot of things could go wrong right now, but if everything works, then the app we created in, well, less than 40 minutes should now work. So there we have it. A functioning timeline with inline editing, distributable, multilingual, version data, unpublished save. That's another neat feature that's brand new in version 6. So the user can say, save it, but don't publish my changes yet. Something that's always been a little bit important because there's so many things we just like to show someone or just save it temporarily and check up something. And there's just way too many things it could also do. So let's see, anything else I have on my slides that I don't want to forget? So this is all the stuff we just did. This was a temporary summary that's already over. And distribution just happened as well. So that's actually it. I hope you liked it. Questions? Yes?
Is there a way to export the data as well?
Yes, the data is actually included. So, for example, in this specific case, if we would go and look into the installed into the target DNN, no, look at the DNN, and you could go into the settings, and you would notice the data is already in there. Maybe you can just pick one, add one you made previously and add it to the timeline.
Yep.
Because a user can always say, here's a new entry, but I'd like to refer to something. For example, he may have already entered people data in one page, and there was a list there, but now on a different page he would like to say Daniel's in charge. Then he would just say, I would like to use the information from that entity, and then it's the same piece of information. So here he's choosing an existing entity, and you'll see they're already all in there, including the ones he made previously. So the data is included. In this specific case, it's published. Yeah, it's just in the app. Everything you just made is in the app. Yeah. Yes?
Is it possible to display this old data? So you prepare this timeline at one portal, the next will another portal, and just select that all items that are on the timeline should be displayed at once. So you don't need to go to each one by one and select.
Okay, yes, that is possible. It has. So his question is whether if you were to export an app and install it in the next place, whether he could just automatically already have all the data included. You would typically do that with the pipeline. Put it this way, the module has a pipeline which says, just deliver the data that was added to this module. That's the default pipeline. With about 3 lines of code, you can say, deliver all the timeline entries. The disadvantage of that would be that if you add multiple modules, they would all show the same data. So it's not quite sure that you would want that. You could then, of course, add an extra field to say this is the bunny timeline and this is the doggy timeline, and then filter by that. So you could do that. But at least in the general, let's say, end-user scenario for these kind of things, we'd recommend to just say, just show the data that was added at this module. Yeah. Oh.
And then I want to import export it and to import to the live side and at all.
Okay, so yeah, there's a few questions that are mixed into one here. First of all, could I export specific pieces of information and then import them somewhere else? And yes, you can. The interface isn't quite worked out yet. So, and there's actually a few dialogues that are hidden. We also now have an XML import. So that you can edit data in Excel and then import it again. But it's not totally idiot-proof yet, so actually most of those dialogues are still hidden. But if you have a specific case, just send us a short email and we'll tell you where they are. Yes? Not yet. Or put it this way, you can, but it needs a bit of code. Because in general, the standard system is just that it provides the module data. And for everything else, maybe you could, are we online?
I think so, yes.
We've added rather extensive documentation how to use the data pipeline. And there's a few really neat things in it. First of all, you could write the pipeline, and then you can say, that you would like to apply filters to it. And then it'll have token providers for the filters, so that you can say, if this and this is in the URL, then this is how the filter should work. It's just a little bit more technical than what we've just been doing. It's not web designer capable, but a C# programmer can do this. And so all the pipeline and filter chaining and all this stuff for how to integrate SQL databases, it's all in here. And whenever we do something or we get a question, we try to make a tiny little demo app and then we put it on the catalog. And we do something special. We reset our global ID so that if you install it and you would change it into your app, you would have a new ID. With a timeline, you don't want that because you want to know that it's the same ID, but if you install a demo, you want to be sure that if you change it, it's not going to be the same app anymore. You had a question?
Yes, I have 2 questions. The list of database seems a bit short. Can you add more? And can you add regular text annotations to the
Yep. So the question about the list of data types. In the background, there's way more functionality than those 4 or 5 types. For example, if you say hyperlink, then you can say whether it should be an external link, whether it should be a file link, or whatever. So actually, we've often consolidated types of data more into the information type that it's stored as. And often if you have a different information type, it's just a different user interface. For example, a string can have a drop-down, but it's still the data type string. A GPS coordinate is still a number. It's just a different, so you can say I want a number, and then you can say I want it as a GPS coordinate, and it'll offer you a Google map to pick the data, and you can automatically say, if the user's entered a few pieces of information already, try to look that up first before showing him the map. So there's a lot of functionality in the follow-up dialogues. Could you add your own? Technically you could. There's no plug-in architecture for that yet. So if you would add your own and you'd get an update, you'd have to add it again. Validation is currently, it's required or not. Does regex work? I think it does, but I'm not 100% sure. I haven't used it in a long time. There's the fields, but actually I'm not 100% sure if we're using them. Yes? Yes, that's if you scroll down, there's a default information. He's now in the string, but if you go to the general settings, you can enter a default text or value that should be used, and you can say it's mandatory, required. A few things I haven't shown you yet. Maybe you could quickly show the app settings. At app level, you can also create settings and resources. These will also be multilingual. And again, it's like creating resources in .NET, except that they're typed. So you have much less guesswork than using a regex file. So I think that's pretty neat. Yes, Sasha?
I see you have some entity type.
Yes.
To make tables linking together?
Yes, you can like say, for example, you could say I have a type called tag, and then you can write a bunch of tags, and then you can say I have a type called picture, and then you can add a bunch of tags to it. And it's one or n relationships. And you can also, in the API, navigate downwards or upwards through the entities. Everything is in the in-memory cache, so it's super fast. So there's like no database queries just because you're accessing the tags, category, parents, titles, whatever property. It's all just in memory. At the moment, it's the cheapest solution. It just tells you it can't because it has this and this and this relationship still going.
So you have to delete all the childs.
Yes. Or detach the linking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can you say it's that you have to detach it? It's a component?
It'll just tell you that this and this still has a relationship with it. Yeah. Yes, the settings, did you just create something? Or
No,
yeah.
not yet.
The settings too are the resources. It's the same thing. It's an entity type. I mean, since we're using a generic kind of database here, we don't care if we create a content type that only has one single record. We're not creating a bunch of SQL tables for it. In the background, it's all an EAV model, an entity attribute value model, similar to the way form and list does it or a lot of other systems. So if we need settings, we just add it here. Typical thing might be the name of the SQL connection, or resources, labels and templates and things like that. If you need the multilingual, there's the app resources. And this too is exported. And in the target system, we have a very, 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 very complex method of matching languages. Because it could be that your source system that exports the app might have German, Switzerland, French, France, and maybe Spanish. And your target system may have something like Ukrainian and French, so not French. So we're doing a lot of matching and mapping to figure out what to put in. But we really think we got that figured out pretty well. So just give it a try. Yes?
Do you have a solution for the date month problem? Store a date in UK and then list of the date month?
The storage is always the international ISO norm. So in the storage, it's standardized, but of course in the output it'll do what the UI is expecting. So if your computer is set to English or UK, you'll have it displayed in the UK way. Okay, I think that's it. I think our time's up too. So I hope you liked it. And I hope you'll try it, because we've spent a lot of time doing this, and we really think it's really, really cool. And I mean, this was just the app functionality. Wait till you use it for content. So I think your users will love it, and so we hope you will too, and thank you for being here.